I know it's beautiful outside. It's unfair. It's Southern California. I'm from New York, so this is really unfair when I look at the sun. But it's an amazing opportunity to hear what everyone's up to. So first of all, I want to thank Dr. Australia and thank you for inviting me to be here and coalescing this amazingly diverse, fascinating, incredible group of people. What I want to talk a little bit about is how we make some of this real in a real life setting. I'm Chief Medical Officer of a longevity, I call it a longevity lab. It's not like a lab with lab rats, it's with human beings who are our patients, who we call members. And you won't find anything about us online, so don't even bother looking. We are called WndrHLTH. We are not the WndrHLTH you'll find online. That's something different. But we are really implementing what we've been talking about here. And I'm going to start before I describe what we're doing at WndrHLTH, which again is really making real what we've been talking about in terms of looking at data, looking at personalization, true personalization, not averages as we heard about earlier, but how do we treat each individual and help them get on the right trajectory toward a healthier life, ideally living longer, but at least living healthier and decreasing those years of decrepitude that many of us have too much of. I think on average 13 years of ill health at the end of our life. So we're really about expanding that health span and shrinking that era of not performing our best. And I want to start by explaining why I'm even doing this. So I'm a little obsessed with longevity. I always have been, probably because my dad had his first heart attack when I was 4 years old. And I really thought I would be growing up without a father. And I love that other people have brought in their personal stories here today. I was feeling a little bit unsure if I should. So thank you for other people who have led the way in that today. Because it's very germane to why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm so passionate about it. I saw somebody that was being very deliberate in what they did, what they ate, how they lived, all of their lifestyle factors, to the point where last week, this picture was taken last week, my dad and my mom celebrated their 65th wedding anniversary. He's 94 years old. He's had 2 other heart attacks. His first one, he was in bed for a year before they even invented open heart surgeries out at Texas Heart Institute with Denton Cooley. He's had, again, 2 more open heart surgeries since then. This is at Volpe. If you're ever in Charleston, where I'm from, do not miss going to Volpe, by the way. So this led me to be very interested in what does longevity mean? What does it mean to live healthy and to be deliberate in that? And when I started seeing back in the 2000s the work of Lee Hood, and I know there are people here from Buck who know Lee Hood very well, when he was at the Institute for Systems Biology, he started coining the term 4P medicine. How many here have heard that term, 4P, right? So that struck me from the early days. I was actually here doing a fellowship. I'm an internist. I did a general internal medicine, health services research fellowship right around that time. And I was doing quality of care research. And I looked at how much sense that made, being proactive, participatory, but especially predictive. And I thought, that's what we need to be doing. Now, this is 1998, 2000, when I was here, and then I stayed on faculty here for about 15 years. And over the course of that time, we inched closer to predictive capabilities, but never really quite got there. And I want to emphasize what we've been hearing today. We are there. We get to, in my case, practice medicine, and other people in the room experience medicine, be in the business of, in the research of, in the financing of medicine at arguably the most exciting time. We are at a true inflection point. And I hope that's really become apparent even more today than obviously you knew that or you wouldn't have come here. But what we're doing where I'm getting to work, and I say getting to work because it's a real privilege, is actually trying to implement that, the powers of that inflection point that we're now witnessing, of being able to take data from the geoscience advances that have come about, to doing testing that we can now do with multi-omics and continuous biosensors to make sense of that data with AI capabilities. I could have had all that data a year ago and I wouldn't have known what to do with it. To have the patient demand, the excitement, the interest. And I'm going to end talking more about that and how incumbent it is upon us to really push for more of that and to talk to people and patients and members more and more. And then the financial investments that are enabling us to grow this, as you saw from the amazing Immunology Institute that's being built here. This is such an exciting time. So I get to do this in a way that makes a lot of sense, as you see on this slide, that enables us to do that 4P medicine and truly implement it by looking at this upstream approach, right? We want to make sure, and I know this is preaching to the choir here, that we are working before early detection. Unfortunately, a lot of patients out there are still excited about early detection, and that's great. That's better than that early treatment or late treatment, but that's not where it should end, right? People are going for their full body MRIs and their Gallery tests, which we just heard about, may not have reached the outcomes they wanted. Sorry if anyone here is with Gallery. But we want to be even before that, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're able to do now, and what we should be insisting on, what we should be doing as clinicians, and what we should be asking of our clinicians if you're a patient, is how do I know years ahead of time what could be coming down the road? I don't want to just wait for early detection, because that's when you're going to make a big difference, right? How many of you have used AllTrails? Anybody here hikers use AllTrails? Or any app like that, right? It's a lot easier to course correct when you first see you're diverging from the trail than if you wait for a couple miles and you're like, oh my God, how much more do I have to do to get back on the trail? So that's where we want to be working. And the way to do that is by doing this deep phenotype testing. And that's what we're doing at WndrHLTH. We're based in New York City. We'll be opening up another site in San Francisco. And we are amassing about 12,000 points of data on every patient, again, who we call members, 3 times a year. And that allows us to identify what are the little N of 1 studies that we can do to really move the needle on what matters to that patient, what matters to me as a clinician. But the key to this is all informed by the world's leading scientists, arguably the greatest collection of longevity minds, I think, that there are. Because we know longevity medicine isn't one medicine, despite what you kind of hear about and read about, and people claim to be a longevity expert. But longevity isn't one thing, right? There's aspects of longevity in every organ and tissue and way we age in our body. So we have coalesced this amazing group of experts in hormonal health, in brain health, in sleep optimization, in microbiome optimization, in genetic testing, in nutrition, and exercise physiology. And everything you see on this slide in terms of our testing is informed by them. Because we ask them, what do we need to do? If we want to really dig deep and get at that early detection, what do we need to assess? And how do we build little N of 1 studies for each individual patient informed by what actually matters? So through them, we have built this array of testing that allows for granularity of assessment to simulate potential health trajectories using digital twins or real N of 1 studies to really assess what's making a difference. And I love that Dr. Frank opened the forum today talking about how universities in general and UCLA specifically, the real mission is knowledge. And what he said was, knowledge leads to transformation of reality. That's what we're doing with patients, and that's what we should be doing. It's 2026. Having enough personalized, precise knowledge about your own lifestyle and what impact that will have on the outcomes that matter to you and to your future. That's what the knowledge of that can lead to, true transformation of that reality. So what we start with is identifying which interventions are going to matter for each individual person. And we call that a lead domino, identifying that lead domino, because not all interventions produce equal returns. For each individual, there's one of these, what we call a lead domino, a specific system or behavior that, when it's optimized, creates the greatest cascade of positive health benefits. Finding it requires a lot of data, requires that deep phenotypic testing that was never available, really, until now. And it's the intersection of what's important to that member or that patient and what your data shows needs improvement that leads to that lead domino. That's the thing that will have a cascading effect on a lot of downstream outcomes. So for example, generic programs that are supposedly personalized aren't going to identify what's going to really make a difference for you. But doing these iterative type N of 1 testing with the right outcomes measurements is going to let you know what will make a difference. If I'm trying to work with you on an outcome, let's say you want to lift your grandchild up over your shoulders and they're about to be born and your kid's pregnant with your grandkid. What am I going to do to help you with that? We're going to try little experiments to help you do that. We're going to find what's your lead domino that you can't do that now. We're going to check your strength. We're going to do scans of your amount of muscle mass. We're going to check your metabolism and your mitochondrial efficiency. We're going to check your power. We're going to check all different aspects to see why aren't you able to lift your hands above your head and be able to lift that grandchild up when they're born. So it's what matters to you, again, and what matters in terms of outcomes and what little N of 1 type studies can I do with you to affect that change. Another example is metabolomic testing. If any of you are clinicians here, I don't know if you're doing metabolomic testing in your practice. It enables you to actually identify issues even before they show up in a regular blood test, right? So for example, one patient with brain fog, she was a CEO, very high functioning, notices when she isn't able to really stay on her game and think as clearly as she wants to. Her metabolomic testing showed things like elevated branched chain amino acids, elevated acylcarnitines. It doesn't matter. The point is, all that points to mitochondrial issues, like mitochondrial congestion, kind of a backup of fatty acid mobilization and oxidation, fueling, if you remember, the Krebs cycle and making ATP and all of that you probably all heard about in high school biology. That wasn't showing up in blood work. It wasn't showing up as blood sugar issues, which you might expect. It wasn't even showing up in a continuous glucose monitor, but it was showing up for her as brain fog. So the type of testing we can do now is to intervene and then bring in our cadre of these amazing scientists, of our exercise physiologists, our nutritionists, our molecular experts, and say, what's going on with her? What can we do to help this mitochondrial congestion, this fatty acid kind of blocking, so to speak? We worked with her on changing her training to zone 2 training primarily and less HIIT, high intensity interval training, on a little more gentle time-restricted eating. She's very intense, and she was doing her time-restricted eating, but that was leading to a little more stress on her system, big fat loads, which is not good if you're not really breaking down fatty acids, on her sleep, on her what we call chronobiology, and really making sure that was optimized. And we completely transformed her ability to think clearly. It wasn't Lyme, it wasn't mold, it wasn't all these other things that she was worried about. It was just this inefficiency that wouldn't have picked up otherwise. And then trying these little N of 1 studies to figure out what made a difference with her. That's the key to where we are now in 2026, and that's the key to real precision medicine and to making a big difference. So what's the plan? Before I get to this, I'll tell you the interventions that we do are everything we've talked about today, and it's been so refreshing to hear. What we're talking about are lifestyle, right? These are not sexy, but these are proven. Until we find the results from Dr. Sinclair's studies on epigenetic reprogramming from whether it's natural substances or pharmaceuticals, we know lifestyle does change epigenetic, I'll say regulation. I don't want to say reprogramming because I can't really prove that, but I can tell you that aspects of your lifestyle, if you meditate and manage stress, if you eat well, how much you sleep and how good your sleep is, you exercise, and your sense of purpose that we talked about flourishing, those are our 5 pillars. That is going to epigenetically affect what gets transcribed and affect your outcomes. So those are the tools we use. We're not talking about fancy tools, because like we heard even from Dr. Verdon, we don't have anything yet that actually extends longevity that's proven yet. But we need to stay as healthy as possible so that when that gets discovered, our suit of armor is as strong as possible. We are as fit as possible. We are ready to take advantage of that. Because who wants to be degrading until that happens, and then by the time that magic bullet comes along, you're in no position to really take advantage of it. So these lifestyle factors are very precise, personalized, and powerful, again, when used in a very precise, personalized way, not generic average recommendations. Like we heard earlier, average doesn't move the needle. Precise precision does. So I want to look at this slide here that talks about how powerful certain aspects of testing are that we don't even know about, that we keep learning about. And this has to do with power. I don't know how many of you saw this study, but it showed how power predicts mortality even stronger than strength. We always knew that strength, grip strength, and muscle mass was an important predictor, but now we know power. This is just another example of testing to really see how can you benefit someone long term. About 6 times higher mortality rate on those with the lowest power than the highest power. So we measure that in a lot of ways at WndrHealth in terms of assessing, are there imbalances, are there asymmetries, what is the power, and how do we increase that? So that's just one example. The key to doing all this, or the reason to do all this, is to maximize this return on effort. So I'm going to give you 2 quick kind of financial analogies. One is return on investment, what we would call return on effort. And that's because when you're working with people trying to help move the needle way upstream, like I talked about, they don't have a pain point. So they're not willing to spend hours and hours of their day changing their diet, working on exercise, focusing on meditation, breath work, all the things we want them to do, because they don't have a symptom. They don't have something that's kind of pushing them to do that. But the way you get them to actually implement some of these changes that are going to affect them years down the road is by personalizing. That's why if you follow your eye along that green curve, the more personalized you get, the more I can do these very granular assessments of where are there any chinks in your suit of armor, and what little intervention is going to move the needle, the more personalized that gets, the better that return on effort. I have one patient who was eating yogurt and blueberries for breakfast, had a CGM, and his blood sugar would spike. So we tried little things. The one thing that actually made a giant difference was just adding 8 almonds. Our nutritionist tried different tricks, and adding 8 almonds to that yogurt and berries dramatically decreased those sugar spikes. Again, minimal effort, but a big return, because we know a lot of time out of range for blood sugar is going to have major metabolic effects. So having that granularity of looking at those N-of-1 studies is key to making sure that we are getting that return on effort. The other aspect I'll come back to later in terms of financial kind of analogies is compounded interest. And that's something that's been brought up already that I'm going to come back to. First, let me explain the guy in the red cap. What that red cap is a sensory processing test. So this was a patient who had, again, kind of cognitive slowing, but didn't recognize it. What they did recognize is that they weren't sleeping well, and they didn't think it was bothering them, and they constantly got 5 hours of sleep. They didn't care. They were functioning just fine, but a test like this that can subtly show sensory processing and ability to gate information picked up that they were already starting to show some slowing that they didn't notice in their normal day-to-day functioning, kind of the opposite of that earlier patient. So working on their sleep, this got them to change their sleep and to work on their sleep habits, but not just general, not average, but looking at specifically their sleep data. Specifically, was it the time they're going to bed, their sleep consistency, their sleep architecture, the amount of REM or deep sleep. So looking at those specifics is what allowed us to make a difference. The other more important part of this slide that people touched on earlier, and I'm so excited, is how do we get people to start engaging when they're younger? Because look at the data on this slide. Cognitive decline starts in your 30s, and we actually know pretty much everything starts to decline in your 30s. We know there's studies that cardiovascular health, hormonal health, immune health starts to decline in your 20s or 30s. This study showed that fitness at age 18 to 20 predicted cognitive performance 25 years later. So that's what I really want to kind of leave us with is, number one, that the best time to start on any of these little self-assessments and self-tests is when you're around 30. The second best time is now. It's never too late, and we heard that earlier. But how do we engage people to start earlier? Like I said, if you're hiking, you don't want to get off course miles and miles down the road. You'll never catch up. If you look at this slide here, if you start young, your health reserve stays high. If you wait till you're later in life, yeah, you're gonna decrease the slope of that curve of decline, but you're never going to get back to where you would have been if you had started younger. So that's kind of the thing I want to leave everybody here with is how do we, doing everything we've been hearing about today, being able to do whatever we're doing in this room at this time, we can have dramatic impact on society. If we think about this optimistically, like Peter beseeched us to do, but how do we really engage? We heard, yeah, there's some signs that the younger generation are really starting to take heed to this. But I would love us to really focus on this and think about, since we are working upstream and we can have such dramatic downstream effects, how do we actually make this feel important enough? I would argue it's rooting it in that purpose and that meaning. For my dad, it was all about living long enough to see his kids grow up. And then once he reached that milestone, it was living long enough to see us get married. And then to see our grandkids. Now I think he's trying to wait till his grandkids get married. But it's tying in with our own or a patient sense of purpose, and then understanding that precision medicine allows that return on effort. Lastly, just to wrap up with what we're doing at WndrHLTH, is our model really is that geroscience meets personalized programming. Data-driven health informed by the best geroscience that's changing an unhealthy aging trajectory to a healthy aging trajectory, again, with all reference to Leroy Hood there. We've built a systematic approach to transform cutting-edge geroscience research into practical, measurable health interventions. This isn't theoretical, it's operational medicine happening now. It's precision optimization, identifying each individual's unique aging signature, and we should all be expecting no less than that. Then crafting interventions specifically designed to slow or reverse that decline in their most vulnerable systems. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry I didn't have time for questions. I tried to go fast. Thank you.